Brethren, we do live in very, very dangerous times. When I look at the news and I look at things that are happening, I get very sobered, and in a way I get very sad to see what's happening in the world. It really is sad. Things are not getting any better. Since the 9/11 terrorist attacks in 2001, the war against terrorism, even though maybe be come across by some people that it's actually that we have killed it, it's not. It's worse. Things are getting worse. A week or two ago, we saw the attacks in Paris against the Jewish market and against that newspaper, Charlie Hebdo, which was terrible. A number of people have been caught because of that, and really things are not looking very bright in the area of terrorism and this Islamic fundamentalist fighters. Things are not looking good. A lot of people, young people, very dissatisfied with their own lives. Maybe they've had everything in their youth. Maybe they were not given a good smack sometimes when they were brought up, and they become rebels, and then they went down to Syria, and they're going to come back to their own home countries. A lot of them are coming back to Europe, and there is the potential of some serious things developing in the near future. I don't think Europe will be the same again. I was shocked when I saw on the news just a couple of days ago that the euro is down to $1.10 or $1.12 or a number like that, when just a couple of weeks or months ago was $1.30, $1.40. So it just shows the dollar is getting very strong and the euro is getting very weak, which kind of says it's amazing because the the United States is in great debt, but the dollar is strong. Why? Because for the people out in the world, there's no other option but the dollar. Even the euro now is frail. And so we are in serious times because there's going to be a time of reckoning soon. Religion is in a crisis. Christians are being murdered in Nigeria, like left, right, and center. In the Middle East, I mean, you've just heard recently of a bus in Tel Aviv where a passenger suddenly just stands up and starts stabbing the driver and passengers, and about 12 people were stabbed. And then there was an attack in synagogue just recently where 4 people were dead with an axe and knives, and 6 were injured. Then there's Ukraine. I mean, you look at what's happening in Ukraine. The reservists, just during this past week, reservists were called up to 60 years old. And that is not good news. Things are not looking good in Europe. Then there's a potential financial crisis looming. I mean, there's elections now in Greece. There's potential of maybe Greece pulling out of the euro and things like that. Who knows? And all this is causing extreme right-wing groups starting to become more and more militant. For instance, in Germany, there's a group called Pegida getting very, very strong and very dangerous. Then in Italy, there's a group called the Golden Dawn, also extremist. And in France, one called the National Front. So we see these things are developing, and if there's going to be another economic crash, and could well be, because now, for instance, we see the price of oil going down and down and down, and you can say, well, it's good news. But some companies, oil companies, got into great debt to do fracking and things like that, and those companies could go bankrupt. And we have a country like, some people say, like Saudi Arabia, which can hold on prices up to about $10 a barrel, and they still make a profit. So some people say maybe they are flooding the market and bringing the prices down. Then we see the king of Saudi Arabia just dying at 90 years old. Another one replacing, saying, well, everything will continue the same. But remember, Saudi Arabia is in the south, is the home of the Sunnis, which basically is who Al-Qaeda is and ISIS are. Those are Sunnis. And then the next door is Yemen. And also they're the home of the two most, quote-unquote, religious sites of Muslims. So we could see some things really changing. The world is really in a crisis. And then you can just look at other areas like China and North Korea and pressures in Asia Pacific. Things are really serious. And what really worries me in when leaders say, and I quote, and I don't want to be disrespectful, but quote things like saying, at this moment, with a growing economy, shrinking deficits, bustling industry, and booming energy production, we have risen from recession freer to write our own future than any other nation on earth. Brethren, I am concerned that this is not the whole truth. And I think you all know that it's not the whole truth. That if you just look around, things are not good. Things are not good. At best, a statement like that could be perceived as an ostrich with the head in the sand, not seeing what is coming out. And it's dangerous because we're deceiving people saying, peace, peace. And turn with me, please, to 1 Thessalonians chapter 5. 1 Thessalonians chapter 5. And in this section, Paul gives some warnings to the brethren about the time of the end, and in 1 Thessalonians chapter 5. But he says, but concerning the times and the seasons, that's in verse 1, brethren, you have no need that I should write to you. For you yourselves know perfectly that the day of the Lord so comes as a thief in the night. And brethren, if we are just saying, well, everything's going well, the economy is going well, shrinking deficits, I don't know, brethren, I think we are in more debt than ever before, and things like that. I think we're just deceiving ourselves. And then he says in verse 3, for when they say peace and safety, and brethren, particularly in this country, we've got to be careful, because that we are not saying peace and safety, because things are dangerous out there, very dangerous. Because he then says, then sudden destruction comes upon them. Brethren, you remember in 2008 there was a bubble, the building bubble. Now, brethren, you could have an oil bubble, and that would be far worse than the building bubble. If the dollar goes down and crashes, for one, we can't do the work anymore. We can't do the work because God's work is financed. God's work around the world is financed basically from the States, from NASA. If the work can't be done, then Amos 8 is being fulfilled, says there'll be a drought, a famine of hearing the word of God. Brethren, we are in serious times, and therefore we need to keep in mind things like Luke 21. And if you turn with me, please, to Luke chapter 21. Luke chapter 21. It's a well-known scripture, and starting in verse 34. Luke 21 verse 34 says, but take heed to yourselves, lest your hearts be weighed down with carousing, drunkenness, and cares of this life. It's easy. Well, things are looking good. The economy is kind of artificially looking better. And bang, we get caught up. And that day come upon you, or come on you unexpectedly. For it will come as a snare on all those who dwell on the face of the whole earth. And verse 36 says, watch, therefore, and pray always, that you may be accounted worthy to escape all these things that will come to pass and to stand before the Son of Man. You see, brethren, people are neglecting the real truth. You know, when you hide and you don't see what's happening around us, you're not really looking at the truth. And yeah, I'm meaning both the truth of things around us, but God's truth. Some people in the church start neglecting God's truth. That has happened before. And I appreciate the sermonette where he told us, listen, tithing is a matter of worship. It's the truth. And people are getting blinded from the truth. And that's why, Christ said, watch therefore and pray always, that you may be accounted worthy to escape. Brethren, these times are going to be terrible. And I hate to focus on this. I really don't enjoy giving a sermon like this. But you and I need to be aware so that we are not deceived. Because these things are going to come, and if we're not watching, yes, we need to watch world events, but we need to watch ourselves, that we not get wrapped up in the cares of this world. And why? Because people are not loving the truth. People are not loving the truth. It'll get to a point that even some people in the church will be deceived. Some people in the church will be deceived. You know, Christ said, be careful, for if it were possible, will deceive the very elect. Well, some people, if they're not watching, they could be deceived. And so, there's one area of great deception which is going to come, which is going to be inspired by Satan, and it's the whole thing about the beast and the false prophet. And so today, brethren, I want to spend a bit of time about looking at some identifying signs of the beast and the false prophet, so that you and I are not deceived. Now, I know it is a very complex subject, and I do not intend today to get involved into technical little details of who is who in the zoo, quote unquote. You know, I just want to look at the big picture. And a good point to start at the big picture, and I'm not going to turn there, but I'm just going to refer to it, is in Daniel 2. Because Daniel 2 is, think about it, is a simple image that describes the whole history from the time when the Jews went captive and they ceased to exist as a major nation, because it used to be under Kings David and Solomon, a huge nation that then it diminished until it was just the Jews, and then the Jews went to captivity, and that ceased. From that moment all the way through history until the time of Christ, basically the Jewish nation has ceased to exist as a strong, powerful nation in the world. Yes, there is a Jewish nation today for the last whatever number of years, but that is necessary to be there for the continuation of that prophecy, so when Christ comes back. But that period, let's call it, of Gentile rulership in the world is depicted by that statue of Daniel 2. And if you think about that statue of Daniel 2, all right, and basically it starts with the head. And if you read in Daniel 2, it explains itself who is the head, all right? And we know it's the Chaldean Empire, which is the King Nebuchadnezzar, the head of gold. And then It goes down to the shoulder, which is the Mede and Persians, which basically conquered the Babylonian Empire. And then after that was Greece, and Greece was controlled by Alexander the Great, and that he then controlled, or he took over the Median Persians. So you can see from the head to the shoulders to the belly and thighs, which was Greece, is the same statue, but one took over or conquered the other. And then the last one is the Roman Empire. And the Roman Empire then was in existence at the time of Christ. Now, the church many years ago put out a chart, and we do have some copies, and Cliff is going to hand out to you, which is a chart which has not been republished of recent, but it was a chart put out long, long ago. And I am not going to go through that chart, but it is something that you can use to study at your own time later on. But on the left-hand side, it basically describes Daniel 2, and you can see that statue and what it represents or signifies with the column on the right-hand side. And then that statue, that Roman Empire continues through resurrections, but it's still the same empire, the one that conquered Greece, which conquered Media Persia, which conquered Babylon. So it's the same region, the same area, that same empire. And that, the last, let's call it resurrection or raising up of that empire, which is represented by the feet, is what Christ will come and will destroy. So that statue of Daniel 2 gives a very good, simple summary of that whole history of those Gentile empires from the time when the Jews ceased to exist as a nation all the way till the time of Christ. Now, at the time of Christ, when Christ was on earth, the ruling empire at that time was the Roman Empire. And you all know, at the time of Christ was on earth, the Roman Empire was the one that was ruling. At the time the book of Revelation was written, which is about 95, the year 95 after Christ, the Roman Empire was the one that was ruling. The other three empires had ceased, quote unquote, to exist. It was the Babylonian, the Medo-Persians, and the Greek had ceased to exist. Sure, their culture, the Greek culture, was influencing the Roman Empire and things like that, and the Greek language, but it was the Roman Empire. And so when the book of Revelation was written, it took it from that point onwards. So the beasts of the book of Revelation basically take from the Roman Empire onwards. They don't look at the others before, except it says that they had some of the characteristics, like they had things like the splendor, like the king of Babylon, which was the head. They had the numeric superiority of an army, like the legs and of a bear, And it says that it had a machine, a war machine, with the cruelty of Alexander, like a leopard. So it had those characteristics, but it was a Roman Empire. So that beast then does not consider the other heads, but it's pointing to the Roman Empire and what it follows thereafter. Okay? So that's the beast that it's spoken of in Revelation 13. So at the time of Christ, it was the Roman Empire that existed, and therefore, after the time of Christ, say about 60 years later, the book of Revelation was written, was shown to the Apostle John, and only the Roman Empire existed at that time. And the Roman Empire existed, continued to exist, until nearly the end of the years 400 or so, was about till the year 476. So the Roman Empire continued to exist in various forms, and as Daniel says, it was terrible and dreadful and exceedingly strong. And so let's look at the beast in Revelation 13, considering that at that time only the Roman Empire existed. And so, therefore, following the track of Daniel 2 and other prophecies in Daniel that explain about these beasts, like Daniel 7 and Daniel 7 through Daniel 11, we know that the beast is the Roman Empire, which was in existence. And therefore, if we read in Revelation 13 verse 1, then it says, I stood on the sand of the sea, and I saw a beast rising out of the sea, having 7 horns and 10, having 7 heads and 10 horns, and on his horns 10 crowns, and on his heads a blasphemous name. We know that this beast is a continuation of the Roman Empire, because it's the one that was historically had come from the others, from the Babylon, from the Medo-Persian, from Alexander the Great. That was the Roman Empire. And so we know where to look for the beast. And so the beast is where the Roman Empire basically was centered, which was basically in Europe, right? Was not in the United States, was not in Russia, but it was basically in Europe. Okay? And the leader of that Roman Empire, therefore, would therefore be a leader in that region, in Europe, not in the States and not in Russia or whatever. So when people say, oh, well, America is the beast, clearly does not follow that track of the Daniel 2, the statue of Daniel 2. So that's important for us to understand the beast. But one of the things that in Revelation 13 it talks about is it sometimes talks about the empire and sometimes talks about the leader of that empire. And the leader obviously is not, for instance, a Russian president, or is not the president of the United States, will be a leader coming in Europe, because the empire is in Europe. And because the empire is ruled by a man, the empire reflects some of the characteristics of that man, how he rules. So let's look at some of the identifying signs of this beast at the end time. And so we start with chapter 13, verse 1. And again, you do have this chart that was published by the church long ago that will help you to study and connect some of these things in more detail. But as I said, I'm not going through those details of pointing who's who and all those details. I just want to highlight a few points about the beast at this end time, who that is, so that when people deceive you with other things, you know, no, that can't be. That's really my purpose today. So, continuing, I says, I stood on the sand of the sea. Now this is interesting. It's a beast, says a beast, rising out of the sea. Now this is important. It's not rising out of the earth, it's rising out of the sea. What do you mean by that? It's the sea of people. You know, even the term, the sea of people. It's out of the people. So there will be some turbulence, demonstrations, big, and out of that, a leader will rise up, which might not necessarily be from a political party, but a leader will rise up from that turbulence from the sea. Okay, so that's the first point. It'll be out of the people, and you can see in Revelation, we don't have to look at it now, but in 17:15 it refers also that the sea represents the people. So that is a reference there to back it up. But anyway, so it'll be a ruler that will come over the same area as the Roman Empire, because you can see it comes from this beast, and it's tied into the prophecies of Daniel. It'll be a blasphemer, like the Roman Empire would say, vicarius filii Dei, which means representative of the Son of God, which is a blasphemy. And that leader will come out and says, guys, I'm going to solve all the problems. Just follow me. I'm going to solve the world's problems. I'm going to solve these wars, the economy. Imagine, Europe, for instance, could be in a terrible financial crisis, worse than it is now, pressure with religion from attacks from radical religious people, whatever, and the whole Europe is in the crisis. What happens? A leader comes up, says, I am going to solve these problems. It has happened before. That's how it happened before. How Hitler, for instance, came to appear. Or not necessarily initially from a political party, but it came out of that sea. And therefore, history, in a sense, repeats itself. And then it continues in verse 2. Now the beast which I saw was like a leopard. In other words, had the characteristics of the previous heads, but it was not the leopard. His feet were like the feet of a bear. His mouth like the mouth of a lion. In other words, had those characteristics of those animals of those previous kingdoms. And the dragon, which you and I know is Satan, gave the beast him, it was the ruler of that entity, the dragon, gave him his power, his throne, and great authority. So we see that that ruler will have great power. Think about the image of Nebuchadnezzar. You know, you think about that image, it had 2 legs and 2 feet, right? You think about Rome, towards the end of Rome, there was a western and an eastern leg, one based in Rome and the other one based in Constantinople, which is now Istanbul. But it had an eastern and western leg. Look at Europe today. It doesn't have a eastern and western kind of look. And it says there'll be 10 kings representing the 10 toes, and could be, I'm not saying it will be, but it could be 5 from the west and 5 from the east. Just interesting. But the point is, it will be from that region, from Europe. So it will have the power from Satan. Then continue in verse 3. And I saw on one of his heads as if it had been mortally wounded, and his deadly wound was healed. So there's this beast was mortally wounded. It was the Roman Empire was mortally wounded in 476 when the barbarians actually destroyed it. In fact, if you look at this little chart, it was the Vandals. The Vandals came, and then was the Heruli and then Ostrogoths. So those 3 combinations of powers, which were not really Romans, but those 3 combination powers, those groups actually caused the fall of Rome, of the Roman Empire. So it had a mortally wounded, but his deadly wound was healed. And it came back, and it's known by some people as the Holy Roman Empire, or the resurrected Roman Empire, which had different resurrections. And if you look here, you can see it had a resurrection, which was, one was the Imperial Restoration by Justinian, the other one was the Frankish, the other one was the German Restoration by Otto the Great, and then was the Charles the Great, and then we have Napoleon, and then the last one was Hitler and Italy that combined during the Second World War, and that period. That was the 6th. So we can see that the beast will come up again, will resurrect again. And when you look at for instance, at at this description, talks about having 10 horns, and on his horns 10 crowns. And when you tie that to the 10 toes, then you can see that there are 10 rulers that will have power, and they'll give the power to the head of the beast. In other words, an 11th ruler. Think about it, to the head. You can see that in Revelation 17, verse 12 and 13, very briefly. Revelation 17, verse 12 and 13. It says, "Now the 10 horns which you saw are 10 kings, which have received no kingdom as yet, but they will receive authority for 1 hour, for a short period, as kings with the beast. And these are all of one mind, and they will give their power." These 10 kings, 10 rulers of 10 nations, will give their power and authority to this other ruler that will raise up. So imagine countries like, I don't know, maybe France, maybe others, will give their ruler their power to that beast, to that power. And continuing in Revelation 13, where we were, in verse 3, at the end of verse 3, "And the whole world marveled and followed the beast." In other words, everybody suddenly, when this appears, and it'll be sudden, will marvel. I mean, it doesn't say sudden, but we know that all this will be sudden. You can just write in brackets Daniel 7 verse 5 and Daniel 8 also verse 5, which shows that it was suddenly that these have come in the past and will happen also very quickly. So the whole world will follow him. And it says in verse 4, "So they worshiped the dragon who gave authority to the beast, and they worshiped the beast, saying, 'Who is like the beast? Who is able to make war with him?'" So it will become a very powerful government and a very powerful ruler, and the whole world will follow them because we'll have enormous war-making capabilities. And then continue in verse 5, "And he was given a mouth, speaking great things and blasphemies." So he will be a man, a person, a leader. There will be an excellent, gifted orator. In other words, he will be able to sway the audiences. And you and I have seen people with those talents that can sway the audiences. People can come suddenly, and then suddenly the whole world follows this man speaking things that are not true. In other words, because people do not love the truth. And people are just not knowing any better, just follow like sheep. And brethren, that's why I'm saying let's be careful, because this will happen again and will lead the whole world to follow that. It says, "So they worship the dragon and worship the beast, saying, 'Who is the beast who is able to make war with him?'" And verse 5, "He was given a mouth, speaking great things and blasphemies. And he was given authority to continue for 42 months, which is basically 3.5 years. That goes in parallel with the period of the 2 witnesses. You can read that in Revelation 11, verse 2 and 3. That's also the period in which the holy city will be trampled. There will also be in parallel with 3.5 years, that's the period that the church will flee. Revelation 12, verse 6. But, 3.5 years, even though when you're going through that pain, it's a long time. But in the big ambit of things, it's actually a short period. God is merciful because that will come and will go. But He will have a lot of authority for that period. So we were reading there in verse 5, continuing in verse 6. Then He opened His mouth in blasphemy against God, to blaspheme His name, His tabernacle, and those who dwell in heaven. So you'll then be a type of person that will blaspheme God, will blaspheme God's things in heaven, and even those that dwell in heaven, the elders in heaven and all that, you will be blaspheming that. So it's somebody that will be defying the true God. Very serious. And then in verse 7, and it was granted to him to make war with the saints and to overcome them. So he will fight God's people. They will be persecuted, and he will overcome them. That's why it says in Luke 21 we read, pray that you may be counted worthy to escape. Because some of us will escape, we just have to be praying that we are counted worthy to escape. And authority was given to him over every tribe, tongue, and nation. So he will have power over every tribe, tongue, and nation. So he'll have worldwide power. Continue then in verse 8. All who dwell on the earth will worship him. The whole world will follow this power. This become an international power that all will follow, and he will say he's solving the world's problems, and whose names have not been written in the book of life or in the Lamb slain from the foundation of the world. So people that don't know the truth, in other words, they have not yet been converted, and their names have not yet been written in the book of life, they will follow. They will follow. So we've got to be careful that we don't fall into that trap. And then continue. If anyone has an ear, let him hear. He who leads into captivity, shall go into captivity, and he who kills with the sword must be killed with the sword. Probably implying that this power that leads people into captivity, that kills people with the sword, himself will be in captivity and will be killed with the sword when Jesus Christ comes. Jesus Christ's sword will kill him and will wipe him out. And therefore he has the patience and the faith of the saints. We've got to have patience. We've got to wait for that period, because it will come and go. We've got to be patient and wait. So that's one beast. That is the civil leader. The civil leader will come from the area of Europe. There will be some turmoil, serious turmoil out in that area. So keep watching for that, serious turmoil in Europe, that will cause some people to rise up out of that confusion as a leader. And he will allegedly, quote unquote, be a good speaker and will deceive everybody, saying he's going to bring and solve all the world's problems if you just follow me, quote unquote. So he will then blaspheme against God, and he will persecute God's people. So let's be careful and be watching in the right place. But then, starting in verse 11, talks about another beast. Now in verse 11 talks, then I saw another beast coming out of the earth. Now look at it. This one does not come out of the sea. It comes out of the earth. Also, it doesn't come out from heaven. It's from the earth. What does that mean? It symbolizes that it already exists. It's already established on earth. It's a system that exists already for a long time, but now it builds up strength again. And then he says, and he had two horns like a lamb. So it appears very non-threatening, very kind and loving, religious, because it's like a lamb. So it's a religious type entity that already exists, but it will rise up from that and will now become more known. In verse 12 it says, before we continue there, I want to highlight a point that Paul tells us to be careful and to watch. So we're going to come back to this section, but I want you to look at 2 Thessalonians now. I want you to look at something that Paul tells us to watch in 2 Thessalonians. 2 Thessalonians chapter 2. 2 Thessalonians chapter 2. We're going to start reading in verse 1, and we're going to read through to verse 4. 2 Thessalonians chapter 2, verse 1. Now, brethren, concerning the coming of our Lord Jesus Christ, and now are gathering together to him, we ask you not to be soon shaken in mind or troubled, either by spirit or by word or by a letter, as if from us, as though the day of Christ had come. So don't be deceived, oh well, Christ has already come, and there's going to be a lot of things like, yes, the full blood moons, and before that was the Mayo calendar, and before that whatever it is, and people are just going to come out with dates, and I don't know. It's just, don't be soon shaken or troubled. Let no one deceive you by any means, whether it's blood moons or this or that, whatever it's going to be, the next one. The blood moons will come and go, then there'll be something else that'll come up. Let no one deceive you, for that day will not come unless two things happen which are important. So two important things to watch that Paul tells us to watch. One, the falling away comes first. That's an apostasy. A falling away or an apostasy. Now, what is the falling away? Some people said, oh well, the falling away was the falling away at the end of the first century. Maybe when there was a falling away in the early church. Others say, oh well, it was when run about in the years 300, the Council of Nicaea and all that was a falling away. Others may say, well, it was in the 90s when it was a falling away. There was a lot of people that knew the truth, and in the mid-90s there was a fall away. Whichever one it is. Maybe there's even a further falling away to come. But the second one is important as well. And it says, and the man of sin is revealed. And the man of sin is revealed. That's the lawless one, as you read a little later on in verse 7 and in verse 8. It talks about the ministry of lawlessness, and then the lawless one will be revealed. So that's the lawless one. That's the one that is against the law, against God's law. So there's going to be a man that is going to be very much against God's law. In verse 4, look at it. Who opposes and exalts himself above all that is called God or that is worshipped, so that he sits as God in the temple of God, showing himself that he is God. So it'll be somebody, that is going to come out and say, I am God, or that he'll sit, that he's called God above all that is worshipped, so that he sits as God in the temple of God. Now, there are two possibilities here. And obviously time will tell us which one it is, but I just want you to... Some people say, well, this means that definitely there will be a temple in Jerusalem. Well, that's one possibility. Because if you read it, that he'll sit as God in the temple of God. But if you read it the other way, that says, he will sit as God sits in the temple of God. So if you read it the way that says, he sits as God in the temple of God, it could mean that he sets up a pagan temple, and he sits in that temple as God sits in the temple of God, claiming that he is God. And if you look, for instance, at Daniel 11:45, you don't have to look at it there, but Daniel 11:45 says that he'll set up the tents of his palace between the seas and against the glorious mountain. And that means between the Mediterranean Sea and the Dead Sea and against the glorious mountain. It says he'll set up some tents. So it could be. The point is, we don't know. We just need to be aware of possibilities. And when these things happen, we then see, oh, well, it's this way or that way. But I'm just giving you possibilities, what it could be. You see, we do know that there will be a stop of the offerings. The offerings will be stopped. But they could do offerings without a temple. They could do offerings just setting up an altar, and do offerings there in a place without building a temple. On the other side, they could build a temple. We don't know. But I think it's just options that we need to keep our eyes open and not focus, well, it has to be this way, because, we don't know everything. And when it comes, we will then see, and it'll become very clear when it happens. So it'll be somebody, will be a man, that will appear in this area. and will place this up. So that's what in other scriptures it's the abomination of desolation, etc. And then when this happens, this is the time. So it actually ties with that. So this is that second beast that comes out of the sea. So let's continue back with Revelation 13. Revelation 13, we were reading in verse 11. So we'll go now read verse 12 of Revelation 13. And it says, "And he exercises all the authority of the first beast in his presence." So they will work together. The first beast, which will be a civil ruler. And there was this religious ruler that they will work together. They'll work together. And will cause people to worship the first beast. It says, yeah, and he exercises all the authority of the first beast in his presence, and causes the earth and those who dwell in it to worship the first beast. To worship the first beast, whose deadly wound was healed. In other words, that Roman Empire, which is now resurrected, and it's now existing as the seventh resurrection. And he says, this beast, this false prophet, says, performs great signs, that he makes fire come down from heaven on the earth in the sight of men. He causes, this false prophet, when he's next to the beast, because the two are together, he will be able to cause fire to come down from heaven. Now imagine, he will have great signs, wonders, that people will say, it has to be the real thing. It has to be. People will be deceived. Keep your finger there. Let's go back to 2 Thessalonians chapter 2, where we were a moment ago. 2 Thessalonians chapter 2. 2 Thessalonians chapter 2, verse 9 and 10. And it says, the coming of the lawless one is according to the working of Satan, with all power, signs, and lying wonders. Brethren, demons can make miracles when God allows them to. They will do lying wonders. Verse 10, with all unrighteous deception amongst those who perish, because they did not receive the love of the truth, that they might be saved. And again, he there's two degrees of knowing the truth. Knowing the truth is people that know better and just being deceived because, they're not watching at things, and they're just being conned by this good speaker, and they're just being conned by his miracles, etc. But spiritually speaking, I believe it also means people that knew the truth and left it because they did not hold on to that truth. They did not love the truth. Brethren, we have to love the truth, God's truth. In other words, it's talking about that converted Christians, that they knew better, they did not really love the truth, and they slipped away. That is frightening. That is frightening. So, brethren, we need to love the truth. Truth is so important. And the truth is so important. So let's continue back in Revelation 13, verse 14. And it says, and deceives those who dwell on the earth by those signs which he was granted to do in the sight of the beast. You see, he is doing it next to the beast. So he's the two leaders are there. He's in the sight of the beast, and he's making these signs that makes people wonder. Now, people in the world know a little bit of the Bible, and what will they say? There's the beast, and there's this guy making these miracles, and people will follow. What will they think these two are? They think these two are the two witnesses. Now, just recently there was a BT program, Beyond Today program on TV, that showed exactly that. There's these two witnesses, the false ones, and there's the true two witnesses. And there's the two false witnesses saying, yeah, I'm going to bring peace, I'm going to bring great stuff, I'm going to bring prosperity and whatever. And then there's the two God's witnesses saying, guys, this is bad, there's bad news, and people, who they're going to follow. Brethren, this is a great con artist work from Satan, deceiving mankind. These are the counterfeit two witnesses. And they will do miracles. And those miracles, and they'll prophesy things, and those things will happen. That people will just follow it blindly. Just because you have magic, just because you have miracles, does it mean they are from God? Just because they are miracles, does it mean they are from God? Turn with me to Deuteronomy chapter 13. Deuteronomy 13. Deuteronomy 13, we're going to start in verse 1 through verse 3. If there arises among you a prophet, or a dreamer of dreams, oh, I had a dream last night. You hear these religions, I had a dream last night, and the Spirit told me this, I remember Hebrews chapter 1, verse 1, that says, in old times, God spoke through that, but now He speaks to us through the Son, Jesus Christ, not through those dreams. So if you have those dreams, I'll be very worried. But it says, if there arises amongst you a prophet or a dreamer of dreams, and he gives you a sign or a wonder, and the sign or the wonder comes to pass. He says, this is going to happen. And you know what? It happens. And the sign or wonder comes to pass, of which He spoke to you, saying, let us go after other gods which you have not known, and let us serve them. That's what this false prophet is going to do. He's going to do miracles and say to the people, let's follow this God, the civil beast. In verse 3, you shall not listen to the words of that prophet. You see, just because they are miracles, does it mean they are from God? No, because demons can cause signs and miracles to happen. Continue verse 3. You shall not listen to the words of that prophet or that dreamer or dreams, for the Lord your God is testing you. God is testing us. God allows it as a test, whether we love the truth or not. Ties in with Thessalonians. Remember, it says they did not love the truth. And it says God is testing you to know whether you love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your mind and with all your soul. You love the truth, yes or not. So brethren, again, back to why I'm giving you the sermon, is to be aware that this is going to happen. And don't be deceived. We've got to love the truth. There'll be great deception. And let's continue reading then in verse 15 of Revelation 13. Revelation 13, verse 15. Verse 14. It says, deceives those who dwell on the earth by those signs which is granted to do in the sight of the beast, telling those who dwell on the earth to make an image of the beast. So what's the beast? The beast is this form of government, this Roman form of government. To make an image of that, and what is it? Is a parallel form of government that the Catholic Church has, following exactly the same system and hierarchy. To make an image of the beast. So it could be that, or it could be idolatry, different idols that they will have and that they will worship. It could be both. Images of that beast, who was wounded by the sword and lived. And verse 15, he was granted power to give breath to the image of the beast. So this image will speak. Think about a little statue or a big statue or whatever it is, and suddenly talks. Wow! And the image of the beast should both speak and causes man who would not worship the image of the beast to be killed. So that is quite powerful. Idolatry there. Verse 16. And he causes all, that's all, both small and great, that's people that famous and not famous, rich or poor, free or slave, to receive a mark on their right hand or on their foreheads. What is God's sign? God's sign is on our right hand and your forehead, and it's the Sabbath. And it's a sign which is voluntary. This is a mark which is forced also on the right hand and on the forehead, which represents forcing people to keep Sunday. And when people are forced to do that, if you keep the Sabbath, you won't be able to have a job. And because you don't have a job, you won't be able to feed your family. You won't be able to buy or sell because you have no money. And that no one may buy or sell, verse 17, except the one who has the mark or the name. The name is who they worship. They worship that organization, who they are, of the beast, or the number of his name, which then it says 666. Which obviously many things have been said about the number. Don't have to go into that now, because some have said it means Latin man, means Nero, means Caesar, and when it happens we'll know exactly which one it is. But I think we have enough here to determine who's the beast, the civil government, and who is the religious government that will be with that beast. And we've got enough here to know so that we are not going to be deceived. With that as background, we can just quickly read through Revelation 17. Because Revelation 17, we'll see how it all really indeed fits together. And Revelation 17 says, then one of the seven angels who had the seven bowls came and talked to me, saying, come, I'll show you the judgment of the great harlot. It was that this second beast, that religious group, who sits on many waters. Many waters, verse 15 says it's people, governs over many people, with whom the kings of the earth committed fornication, and the inhabitants of the earth were made drunk by the wine of a fornication. It was their immorality and false religious things. And he carried me away into the spirit, into the wilderness. What is a wilderness? A place where there's no truth. It's a wilderness. There's no truth. They do not love the truth. Goes into a wilderness. And I saw a woman sitting on a scarlet beast, which was full of names of blasphemy, having 7 heads and 10 horns. So this woman rides this military power, this beast, this military power. The woman was arrayed in purple and scarlet, adorned with gold and precious stones. This religious entity's got a lot of money. Now, which religious entity out there has got tons of money? That's another sign. And it says, and on her forehead a name was written, Mystery, Babylon the Great, the mother of harlots and of the abominations of the earth. It's a mystery. And it's Babylon the Great. Because why? The religious beliefs of this organization, which are promulgated today, even though they dressed up as Christian, they actually have roots in Babylon. And you need to start looking at what are the roots of things like Christmas. You look at roots of a lot of those beliefs, they come from Babylon. The mother of harlots, in other words, got many other children, quote-unquote Protestant followers, that will go through an ecumenical reunion and coming back together. Continue then in verse 6. And I saw the woman drunk with the blood of the saints. So we'll do war, we'll fight true Christians, and with the blood of the martyrs of Jesus. And I saw her, I marveled with great amazement. But the angel said to me, why do you marvel? I'll tell you the mystery of the woman and of the beast that carries her, which has the 7 heads and 7 horns. So we know who the woman is, and we know who the beast is. You know, the resurrected European Roman Empire, and the woman, the church that controls that power and has controlled in the past. He says, the beast that you saw was and is not, and will ascend out of the bottomless pit. In other words, the beast, this Roman Empire, was. It existed. It does not exist now, but it will ascend again. It will resurrect again. Out of the bottomless pit. So out of nowhere, it will just come up. And will go to perdition. It will be destroyed completely. And those who dwell on the earth will marvel. Those whose names are not written in the book of life from the foundation of the world, when they see the beast that was, and is not, and yet is. You know, is to come. So it's the names of those that are written in the book of life. Those true Christians, now that have repented, they'll have their names written in the book of life. They will not follow, but we have to be careful that we don't get deceived. Verse 9. And he has the mind which has wisdom. The 7 heads are 7 mountains. In other words, 7 governments, 7 nations on which the woman sits. These are also 7 kings. 5 have fallen, 1 is, and another has yet to come. So those 7 are the 7 resurrections. 5 have happened, 1 is. Is when this was understood by the church during the period of the Second World War. And that's when this was put together out, this chart. When was understood by the church? It was at that time, the time of Hitler, the time of that one that was is. Now that one is past. Okay, and he says, and the other is not yet has not yet come. In other words, there is a resurrection still to come. And when he comes, he must continue for a short time. Thank God it will be for a short time. The beast that was and is not is himself also the 8th. And he's of the 7. And he's going to perdition. The beast, it was the 7 resurrections, but it is the 8th because it was the Roman Empire that makes 8. The Roman Empire, which disappeared, and then it had the 7 resurrections. So it's the 7, but it's of the 8. So that explains that. And it's going to perdition. The 10 horns which you saw are 10 kings. Those are the kings of those 10 toes, the lost ones of the last resurrection, the 10 kings who have received no kingdom as yet, but they will receive authority for 1 hour as kings with the beast at the time of the end. So, and then it says, these are one mind, and they'll give authority and power to the beast. These will make war with the Lamb when Christ comes. So it'll be right at the end. They'll fight Christ. They'll deceive the world to fight Christ. For he is the Lord of lords and King of kings, and those who are with him are called, chosen, and faithful. And that's what you and I want to be. Faithful right till the end. Faithful right till the end. And then he said to me, the waters which you saw, where the harlot is, are people, so we've explained that. And the 10 horns which you saw on the beast, these will hate the harlot, making it desolate, and naked, eat her flesh, and burn her with fire. So right towards the end, they will pillage this religion. The beast power, the civil government will pillage and says, come on, why are they living off us? We'll pillage them, and they'll use those resources to fight Christ. For God has put into their hearts to fulfill his purpose, to be of one mind, and to give their kingdom to the beast until the words of God are fulfilled. And the woman which you saw is that great city which reigns over the kings of the earth. So that's that city, the Roman Church. That is a city that rules over the kings of the earth. And then we continue in chapter 18. After those things, I saw another angel coming down from heaven, having great authority, and the earth was illuminated with his glory. And he cried mightily with a loud voice, saying, Babylon the great is fallen. It fell down, and it will fall again. It's fallen completely, and became a dwelling place of demons and prison. And they will fall completely, and their end will be together. You can read in Revelation 19, when Christ comes, he will fight the beast and the false prophet. The two will be there, and Christ will put them in the lake of fire. They'll be completely destroyed. The point here is that we have a warning, brethren, not to be deceived. A warning which is highlighted in 2 Thessalonians that I just want to briefly highlight it to you again. 2 Thessalonians chapter 2. 2 Thessalonians chapter 2. Second Thessalonians chapter 2, starting in verse 9. It says, the coming of the lawless ones according to the working of Satan with power, signs, lying wonders, and with all unrighteous deception, and amongst those who perish because they do not receive the love of the truth. Brethren, you and I need to love the truth. We live in dangerous times. We live in very dangerous times. And it's easy to know all these things academically. It's all knowledge, etc. But brethren, we must have the love of the truth. And then in verse 11, and for this reason God will send them strong delusion that they should believe the lie. So there's going to be a lie, and people are going to believe it. And that they may be condemned who did not believe the truth, but had pleasure in unrighteousness. Brethren, we got to live God's way in righteousness. The world will not recognize the beast, and they'll be led astray. They will not recognize a false prophet, because they're not watching these real indicators. Will you and I recognize it? You and I need to make sure that we're not part of this, to avoid the beast and a false prophet. We individually and collectively represent the body of Christ, individually as members, and collectively we work together to do God's work. Our goal, brethren, is to be sanctified by God's Holy Spirit so that we become more pure, so that we can display the glory of Christ at Christ's coming. I covered a sermon on that topic early on, but look how Paul concludes that in verse 13 through 15. It says, 2 Thessalonians chapter 2, verse 13. But we are bound to give thanks to God always for you, brethren, because by the Lord, because God from the beginning chose you for salvation through sanctification. In other words, making you saints by the Spirit and belief in the truth. So we've got to love and believe the truth. To which He called you by our gospel for the obtaining of the glory of our Lord Jesus Christ. He called us by this gospel for us to obtain the glory of Jesus Christ. That's the goal. Therefore, brethren, stand fast and hold the traditions which you were taught, whether by word or our epistle. Brethren, you and I need to hold fast till the end.